Hey everybody, it's Brian, and welcome back to the shop. So today we're going to get back into some turning, and we're going to concentrate on making one of these, a finishing jar. Now, this is one that I made well over a year ago, and as you can see, it's well used. Now, I'm sure a lot of you guys out there are guilty of the same thing that I did here, and that was I needed a finishing jar really quick, and so I went ahead and threw one together for a project, and I told myself, well, as soon as I get done with that project, I'll make a good one. Well, I never really got around to it. So this one was not put together exactly the way I wanted it to. I just threw one together. The handle, as you can see, is very loose. I wound up hot gluing it back together some time ago, and of course that's broke free now. But all that's going to change today. I'm going to show you guys how to make a really nice, very sturdy finishing jar that will last you for years to come. So let's grab some supplies and get started. Alright, so I'm going to start with the handle. Seems like a logical place to start. And of course, for handle material, you can use anything. You can use a solid piece. I like to use up some scrap around the shop and try and make it look a little more decorative. So what I did was I glued up a blank of a wingy, maple, and purple heart, just kind of a symmetrical pattern here. And we're going to start turning and form the handle right now. And as we go along, I've got a few tricks to show you how to secure this and make sure that it's going to last for years to come. Okay, so our blank is pretty much round now, and we're going to move on to the next step. And yes, in case you're wondering, I am using a bowl gouge. This is purely a preference thing. As you guys probably know, I am more of a bowl turner than I am a spindle turner. So I have much more time using a bowl gouge, and I'm just more comfortable with it. It's kind of no different than using either a skill saw to make a straight cut or a jigsaw. Either one's going to get the job done. But for me, it's either the bowl gouge or the skew are pretty much my two go-to tools. So that's what I'm going to use right here. But right now, I'm going to break down the lathe and set it up for the next operation, which I'm fixing to show you. Okay, so what I've done is I added my homemade steady rest here to support the blank. And what we're going to do is we're going to bore out the center of it. And we're boring it out to put in one of these threaded inserts. These are very handy little items here. So the idea is it's going to thread in, and then we can use the machine threads that are on the inside to help secure our brush to the jar. So with our hole bored, we're ready to put our insert in. Now, when you buy these inserts, the threads, as you can tell, are extremely coarse on here, and they're actually pretty flat, meaning there's not any taper to it, so it's very hard to get this thing started initially. So what I did was I actually took it over to the grinder and held it at a little bit of an askewed angle, and then that way I basically tapered the threads myself. This is brass, so it's fairly soft to work. So with it tapered, I'm ready to now put it into the end of our blank here. Okay, so now that our insert has been threaded in, what we're going to do is bring the tailstock back in, and that's going to support the blank on this end while we turn it. And now we're actually going to start shaping the handle. And of course, this part is really up to you. Shape it however you want, whatever's going to be the most comfortable for you. But remember, you don't want to go too thin here because we don't want to hit our insert. Plus, the hole continued a little bit further because of the bolt essentially that's going to be going up in the middle. So make sure you don't turn it too thin because you don't want to hit that. So there's my handle, turned and sanded and just about ready to part off from the lathe. But first I'm going to put a finish on it. And in the final bout of irony here, I'm actually using my original one to finish my new one here. So I'm going to finish putting some lacquer on this, and while this is drying, we're going to go over and start working on the bottom half and see how this all comes together. Okay, so here's the brush that we're going to use. Obviously, we're only going to use the bottom half. We're making a new handle, which we've already completed. Now, the way this is all going to come together is we're going to use one of these right here, and these are called dowel hangers, and you can pick them up at pretty much any hardware store. There's usually, back with the nuts and bolts, there's usually a little specialty section that has hardware like this as well as the threaded insert that we used on the handle. So our problem is the handle is only about 3/8 of an inch, and the threaded portion is very close to that diameter. And if we were to simply cut this brush off and screw it in, chances are it's going to split on us. So what I did was took some scrap pieces, and I actually rounded it over. I took it to the router table while it was still a long piece and knocked off the corners, and then took it to the sander and just kind of freehanded the front of it so that it has a nice rounded profile. Again, that's just overkill, but you know, that's just me. So what we want to do now is take it over to the miter box, and we want to cut through all 3 of these layers. And the idea, of course, is so that we're going to have more meat to screw into so that we don't split it, but also it's going to give us a wider cross section so that when it butts to the lid, it's going to be a lot more stable. Now anytime you do a cut like that, you always want to use a backer like this, an auxiliary fence and table combination. Had I not used this piece would more than likely want to fall down and get kicked around. Another reason is obviously trying to balance it here where there is no backing is not a good option either. So use a backing plate like this, and again, if you're not comfortable with your hand being that close to the blade, clamp it down. You know, I guess I'm used to doing this kind of work, and I feel fairly comfortable with it. But you know, safety ultimately is up to you guys, so do whatever you feel comfortable with. All right, so over at the drill press, what I did was I took a little vise here, and I've got it clamped in here, and I've got the vise turned sideways, of course, so that we can drill vertically through our piece here. So I've got some crosshairs drawn, and we're ready to drill our pilot hole. So we're ready to drill the hole through the lid, and obviously you could use the drill press for this, but the lid fits very nicely in the chuck, and this way I don't have to worry about centering it over at the drill press. Here I know it's going to be centered. Okay, so we're ready to put this whole thing together. So just to quickly review, we have the bottom half of our brush, which we widened, of course, with some extra material. We've got our dowel hanger, which has the machine threads on one side sticking out, of course, the screw threads on the inside now. And we're going to slip our cap in. Now here's a little trick that you might overlook. What I've got here is a neoprene washer, and these you should be able to pick up at any hardware store. Just check the plumbing section. They usually have them by themselves. And when I screw on my knob here, the idea is not so much that it will keep the air out. It's more actually to give a little bit of spring and essentially work like a lock washer, really. I want it to add a little bit of resistance to these threads here so that it's not going to vibrate loose over time. It will, of course, add a little bit of a seal to keep the finish, you know, from hardening on me. But with no more finish than this right here is going to hold, I'm really not worried about it. I'll probably use the finish before it starts to harden anyway. At least I have so far. So there we go. Alright guys, so another project completed. In about 30 minutes worth of time, we went from this to this. Now with the addition of the threaded insert in the handle, as well as the neoprene washer to help dampen vibration to keep it from loosening, as well as provide a little bit of a seal, a jar like this should last you for many, many years. And the best part about making one like this that has a removable handle is that over time, inevitably, the threads on this old jar are going to get gummed up. So when that happens, simply throw this jar away and you can screw on the same brush with the same handle on a new jar. So a very simple, very easy project. And in fact, I made 2 new ones. I'm going to have one for sand and sealer and one for my lacquer. So Hope you guys learned something and get out there and make a couple for yourself. Thanks for watching.